Emma stumbled into the Lakota camp with blood on her dress and terror in her eyes, clutching a baby that wasn't breathing. The infant's lips had turned blue from the cold, and her own face bore fresh bruises that told a story she didn't need to speak aloud. Chief Akecheta looked up from the evening fire, his dark eyes immediately assessing the desperate woman who had appeared like a ghost from the prairie darkness. His warriors tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but he raised a hand to still them. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "My baby. She won't wake up." The child in her arms was maybe 6 months old, tiny and still. Emma's tears fell onto the infant's pale cheek as she swayed on her feet, exhaustion and desperation keeping her upright through sheer will. Akecheta rose slowly, his imposing frame casting shadows in the firelight. Emma stepped backward instinctively, clutching the baby tighter, but he made no sudden movements. Instead, he called softly in Lakota, and an elderly woman emerged from one of the lodges. The medicine woman, Winona, took one look at the scene and hurried forward. She gestured for the baby, speaking rapidly to Akecheta in their native tongue. Emma hesitated, her arms tightening protectively. "She can help," Akecheta said in careful English, his voice deep but gentle. "Winona has delivered many babies, saved many lives." Emma's legs gave out then, and she sank to her knees in the dirt. The baby felt so cold, so still. She had run for 3 days through the wilderness, following the river, praying for a miracle. Her husband's fists had finally gone too far, and she had taken their daughter and fled into the night. Akecheta knelt beside her, close enough to help, but far enough to avoid frightening her further. "What is your name?" "Emma," she managed. "This is Lucy." Winona gently took the baby from Emma's reluctant arms and immediately began working, breathing into the tiny lungs, rubbing the small chest with practiced hands. The camp fell silent except for the crackling fire and Winona's urgent whispers. Other tribal members had gathered, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and concern. Akecheta spoke to them in Lakota, his tone firm and commanding. Emma caught the word woman and child, but understood nothing else. A young warrior stepped forward, speaking rapidly to Akecheta with obvious agitation. Emma could tell from his gestures and tone that he was arguing against helping her. The chief's response was short and final. Suddenly, a weak cry pierced the night air. Lucy's voice, thin but unmistakably alive, sent Emma's heart racing with relief. Winona smiled, continuing to rub the baby's back as the cries grew stronger. "She lives," Akecheta said simply, and Emma burst into tears. The medicine woman wrapped Lucy in a warm fur and handed her back to Emma, speaking softly to Akecheta. He nodded and turned to Emma. "Winona says the baby needs warmth and food. You both do. There is a lodge where you can rest." Emma looked around at the faces surrounding her, some curious, some skeptical, but none hostile. She had expected to be turned away, or worse. Her husband had always said Indians were savages who would kill her on sight. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Akecheta studied her bruised face, the terror still lingering in her eyes, the way she held herself as if expecting a blow. "Because you need help," he said simply. As Winona led her toward a warm lodge, Emma glanced back at the chief. He stood silhouetted against the fire, watching to ensure she was safely settled. For the first time in months, the tight knot of fear in her chest began to loosen. Maybe, just maybe, she and Lucy would survive after all. The council's voices rose like thunder as they demanded Akecheta explain why he harbored the enemy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the circle where the tribal elders sat, their weathered faces stern with disapproval. "You bring danger to our people," declared Tokala, the eldest warrior. "White settlers mean only trouble. They take our land, kill our buffalo, break their promises. Emma sat outside the lodge where she had spent the night, Lucy nursing quietly in her arms. She could hear every word of the heated debate, even though much of it was in Lakota. The tone needed no translation. "This woman has done nothing to us," Akecheta replied, his voice calm but firm. "She came seeking help for her child. Would you have me turn away a mother whose baby was dying? The whites show us no such mercy," spat another council member. "They would not save our children." Emma's stomach twisted with guilt. She was causing division among these people who had shown her kindness. Lucy stirred in her arms, and Emma adjusted the soft fur blanket Winona had provided. The baby's color was healthy now, her breathing steady and strong. Wakapi, an elder woman with silver-streaked braids, spoke in rapid Lakota. Emma caught the word for woman and child, but little else. Whatever she said caused several men to nod thoughtfully. "Grandmother Wakapi speaks wisdom," Akecheta said, switching to English for Emma's benefit. "She says a mother protecting her child is the same in all tribes, all colors. The spirits honor such courage." Tokala stood abruptly. "And what of her husband? He will come looking. Will you fight all the white soldiers to keep her?" Emma's blood ran cold. Of course, Richard would follow her. He considered her his property, like his horses or cattle. She stood slowly, Lucy in her arms, and approached the council circle. The men fell silent as she neared. "I should go," she said quietly. "I don't want to bring trouble to your people." Akecheta's dark eyes met hers. "Where would you go?" The simple question hung in the air. Emma had no family, no friends, no money. Richard had isolated her completely, making sure she had nowhere to run. She had fled into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and the dying baby. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then you will stay until you do know," Akecheta said firmly, turning back to the council. "This is my decision as your chief." "Your decision could cost us all," Tokala warned. "The soldiers will come." "Let them come," Akecheta replied. "We have done nothing wrong by saving a life." An older man Emma hadn't seen before emerged from one of the larger lodges. His presence immediately commanded respect, and even Tokala bowed his head slightly. This had to be the head chief or a powerful medicine man. He spoke at length in Lakota, his voice carrying the weight of years and wisdom. Emma watched Akecheta's face as he listened, trying to read his expression. When the old man finished, silence fell over the gathering. "Grandfather Chayton reminds us that the spirits test our hearts," Akecheta translated. "Sometimes the test comes in unexpected forms. He says we should look deeper before making our judgment." Emma felt tears threatening again. These people owed her nothing, yet they were debating her fate as if she mattered. After years of being told she was worthless, the simple act of being considered worthy of discussion moved her deeply. "I can work," she said suddenly. "I can help with cooking, sewing, anything you need. I don't want to be a burden." Winona, who had been sitting quietly during the debate, smiled and spoke to the council in Lakota. Whatever she said brought nods from several members. "The medicine woman says you have gentle hands with the baby, and you helped her gather herbs this morning without being asked," Akecheta said. "She thinks you have a good heart." Tokala looked unconvinced, but sat back down. "We will see what the spirits decide. But when trouble comes, remember that I warned you." Akecheta's eyes never left Emma's face. Some things are worth the risk. As the council dispersed, Emma realized that for the first time in her adult life, someone was willing to fight for her right to exist safely. The feeling was both terrifying and wonderful. Emma flinched when Akecheta approached, but his hands held only warm soup and gentle patience. 3 days had passed since the council meeting, and she was slowly learning to distinguish between different types of male presence. Acacia moved like water, smooth and unhurried, never making sudden gestures that might startle her. "Winona says you have not eaten today," he said, settling the wooden bowl beside her on the log where she sat. Lucy slept peacefully in a cradleboard the women had crafted, her tiny face serene. "I'm not very hungry," Emma lied. In truth, she was always hungry, but years of eating last and least had trained her body to ignore its needs. "The baby needs you strong," Akecheta observed, sitting down several feet away, close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid crowding her. Emma picked up the bowl with trembling hands. The soup was rich with meat and vegetables, better than anything she had tasted in months. Richard had controlled every aspect of her life, including food, using her meals as punishment when she displeased him. "Tell me about your home," Akecheta said quietly, watching the evening sky. Emma nearly choked on the soup. "My home, before, when you were happy." The question surprised her. No one had asked about her happiness in so long she had almost forgotten the concept existed. "I lived with my aunt in Missouri. She had a farm, grew the most beautiful flowers. I helped her with the garden. You like growing things." "I did." "I had good hands for it," she said. Emma looked down at her hands, now rough and scarred from years of harsh treatment. "I wanted to teach Lucy about flowers someday." Akecheta nodded toward a group of women working near the river. "Winona grows healing plants. She might like. She's already done so much for us. She enjoys teaching, and you need something to fill your days while you heal." The word heal hung between them. Emma hadn't realized her injuries were so obvious, but then again Akecheta seemed to see everything. He noticed when she favored her left side where Richard had kicked her. He saw how she positioned herself near exits ready to run. He observed the way she held Lucy like a shield against the world. "Why are you being so kind to us?" she asked suddenly. Akecheta was quiet for a long moment, watching the fires dance. "My sister was taken by soldiers when we were children. She was about your age. I often wondered if anyone showed her kindness or if she died alone and afraid." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm sorry, it was long ago. But when I see fear like yours, I remember her face." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars appeared overhead. Emma found herself relaxing slightly, the constant tension in her shoulders easing for the first time in months. Lucy stirred and whimpered softly. "She's hungry," Emma said, reaching for the cradleboard. "I will give you privacy," Akecheta said, starting to rise. "No, it's—" Emma stopped herself. She had been about to say it was fine, but realized she actually meant it. The thought of being alone with her baby near this man didn't fill her with dread. "You don't have to leave." He settled back down, turning his gaze toward the fire while Emma nursed Lucy. The simple act of not being watched suspiciously while feeding her child felt revolutionary. "Akecheta," she said softly. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." He turned to look at her then, and Emma didn't flinch away from his direct gaze. His eyes held no threat, no demand. Only a quiet understanding that reached something deep inside her chest. "You are safe here, Emma, you and Lucy both." For the first time since fleeing into the wilderness, Emma allowed herself to believe those words might actually be true. The baby finished nursing, and Emma held her against her shoulder, patting her back gently. "She looks like you," Akecheta observed. Emma smiled, a real smile that felt strange on her face. "Poor child. I hope she gets her father's height. She will be strong like her mother." The compliment caught Emma off guard. Strong was not a word she associated with herself. She was the woman who had endured beatings in silence, who had stayed far too long in a dangerous situation, who had nearly let her baby die from cold and neglect. But she was also the woman who had found the courage to run, who had carried a sick infant across miles of wilderness, who had walked into a camp of strangers and begged for help rather than watch her child die. Maybe strength came in different forms than she had imagined. As Lucy drifted back to sleep, Emma realized she was sitting comfortably beside Akecha without her muscles coiled for flight. The revelation was both thrilling and terrifying. "Tomorrow I'll help Winona with the plants," she said. Akecheta smiled. She will be pleased. The sound of approaching horses sent Emma diving behind Akecheta, her whole body shaking with recognition. She knew the rhythm of those hoofbeats, the particular way Richard spurred his mount when he was angry. Lucy began crying in her arms, sensing her mother's terror. "Emma?" Richard's voice cut across the camp like a whip. "Get out here now." Akecheta stood slowly, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. The entire camp had gone silent. Children hurried into lodges, and warriors emerged with weapons ready. Emma pressed herself against Akecheta's broad back, Lucy's cries muffled against her shoulder. "You're trespassing," Akecheta called out in clear English. "This is sovereign tribal land." Richard rode closer, flanked by 3 other white men Emma recognized as his drinking companions from town. All were armed and looked eager for trouble. "I'm here for my wife and child," Richard snarled. "That squaw-loving savage has no right to keep them from me." Emma's stomach clenched at the familiar venom in his voice. She had heard that tone countless times before. It was followed by his fists. But this time she wasn't alone and helpless. The woman came seeking help for her sick child, Akecheta replied, his voice steady. "She is free to leave when she chooses. She's my property, just like that brat. Emma, get over here before I lose my patience." Emma's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to step out from behind Akecheta. Richard's face was flushed with alcohol and rage, his pale eyes fixed on her with the promise of violence. "Hello, Richard," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Look at you," he sneered, "living like an animal with these savages. Get your things. We're going home." "No." The word slipped out before Emma could stop it. Richard's face darkened. "What did you say?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs, but she lifted her chin. "I said no. I'm not going back." The backhand was swift and brutal, sending Emma stumbling sideways. But before Richard could strike again, Akecheta moved like lightning, catching the white man's wrist in an iron grip. "You will not touch her again," the chief said quietly, his voice carrying deadly promise. Richard tried to pull free but couldn't break Akecheta's hold. "Let go of me, you red devil, or I'll have the army down here burning your whole camp." "Try," Akecheta said simply, releasing him. One of Richard's companions raised his rifle, but suddenly found himself surrounded by Lakota warriors who had appeared as if from nowhere. The odds had shifted dramatically in seconds. "Emma belongs to me," Richard spat, rubbing his wrist. "I paid good money for that mail-order bride, and she's coming home." "I am not property," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "And Lucy deserves better than watching her mother get beaten. You ungrateful witch. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Running off to play Indian?" Winona appeared beside Emma, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Other tribal women formed a circle around them, their faces fierce with maternal protection. Emma had never felt so supported in her life. "These people saved my daughter's life," Emma said. "They've shown me more kindness in 1 week than you did in 3 years. Richard's hand moved toward his gun, but found himself staring down the arrows of a dozen Lakota warriors. Akecheta stepped forward, placing himself directly between Richard and Emma. "You have your answer," the chief said. "She chooses to stay." "This isn't over," Richard snarled. "I'll be back with the law. We'll see how brave you are when the cavalry comes calling." "We will be here," Akecheta replied calmly. As Richard and his men wheeled their horses around and rode away, Emma collapsed to her knees, Lucy clutched tight in her arms. The confrontation had lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Akecheta knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" Emma touched her stinging cheek where Richard had struck her. "I'm fine." But he meant what he said about coming back. "Then we will be ready." Emma looked around at the faces surrounding her, all showing concern and determination. These people barely knew her, yet they were willing to face potential violence to protect her. "I can't ask you to fight for me," she whispered. "You did not ask," Wikipedia said in careful English. "We choose." Emma burst into tears then, overwhelmed by the simple gift of being chosen, of being worth protecting. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing her battles alone. Akecheta's hand touched her shoulder gently. "You were very brave." Emma looked up at him through her tears. "I was terrified. Brave does not mean unafraid. It means acting despite the fear." As the camp slowly returned to normal around them, Emma realized something had fundamentally changed. She had stood up to Richard. She had said no and meant it. Whatever came next, she would face it as a woman who had found her voice. The eldest council member stood slowly, his weathered face grave as he delivered a judgment no one expected. Grandfather Chayton had been silent for 3 days while the council debated Emma's fate, but now his voice carried the weight of final authority. "The spirits have spoken through dreams and signs," he said in careful English, ensuring Emma understood every word. "This woman and child are under our protection. Any who would harm them must first answer to the Lakota Nation." Emma's knees nearly buckled with relief. She had spent 3 sleepless nights expecting to be turned away, sent back to Richard, or cast out to fend for herself. Instead, the tribal council was offering her something she had never dared hope for: true sanctuary. Tokala, who had argued most strongly against her presence, looked stunned. "Grandfather, the soldiers will come. They will use this as excuse to attack our people." "Let them come," Chayton replied. "We have broken no laws by protecting a woman and child from violence. If they attack us for showing mercy, they reveal their own darkness." Akecheta stepped forward, his expression carefully controlled, but Emma could see the satisfaction in his dark eyes. "The council has spoken. Emma Patterson and her daughter Lucy are now under tribal protection. They may stay as long as they wish." Richard had returned twice since his first confrontation, each time with more men and louder threats. The last visit had included the local sheriff, who had been notably uncomfortable with Richard's demands, but equally reluctant to challenge tribal sovereignty. The legal situation was murky, and no one wanted to be the spark that ignited a larger conflict. "There is more," Grandfather Chayton continued, his ancient eyes finding Emma's face. "The woman has shown herself to be of good heart. She works without complaint, helps our medicine woman, and treats our children with kindness. If she wishes, she may become one of us in truth." Emma's breath caught. Adoption into the tribe would mean permanent protection, a real home, a future for Lucy. But it would also mean severing her ties to the white world forever. "I don't understand," she whispered. Winona stepped forward, smiling warmly. "He offers you a place among our people? You would be Lakota, with all the rights and protections that brings." Emma looked around the circle of faces. Some were still skeptical, but many showed acceptance, even warmth. These people had watched her for weeks, testing her character through small acts and daily interactions. Apparently, she had passed their unspoken trials. "What about Lucy?" Emma asked. "She would be raised as one of our children," Akecheta said. "Loved and protected by the entire tribe. Emma's mind raced. In the white world, she was a runaway wife, a woman without legal standing or protection. Her daughter would grow up bearing the stigma of her mother's choices. But here, among the Lakota, they could both have dignity, safety, purpose. "I accept," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "If you'll have us, we would be honored to call ourselves Lakota." Grandfather Chayton smiled for the first time since she had known him. "Then it is done. The woman Emma is dead. In her place stands Waikopee Waste, good star woman, for she guided us to remember our compassion." The ceremony was simple but profound. Emma knelt before the council fire while Winona painted sacred symbols on her forehead with white clay. Prayers were spoken in Lakota, calling on the spirits to bless this new beginning. When it was finished, Emma felt fundamentally changed, as if she had shed an old skin and emerged renewed. As the crowd dispersed, Akecheta approached her. "How does it feel to be reborn?" "Terrifying," Emma admitted. "And wonderful." "Good star, woman," he said, testing her new name. "It suits you." Emma looked down at Lucy, sleeping peacefully despite the ceremony around her. Her daughter would grow up free, protected, loved by an entire community. She would learn to be strong without learning to fear. "Akecheta," Emma said softly. "Yes?" "When I first came here, I was running from something, but now I feel like I'm running towards something instead." His smile was warm and genuine. "And what is that?" Emma met his gaze steadily, no longer flinching from direct eye contact. "Home. I think I'm running toward home." "You have found it," he said simply. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma felt a peace she had never known. She was no longer a victim in hiding. She was Waikopee Waste, good star woman, member of the Lakota Nation, mother to a daughter who would know only love and protection. For the first time in her adult life, she was exactly where she belonged. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility, and Emma was no longer afraid to claim it.